Well, hello, hello. I am your host, Tigress Sydney Acute McDaniel, and this is Evolve Weekly. I am playing around with the title a bit. You all know that I have started my legal education platform, vocational legal education, called the Ethical Gatekeeper. And so I'm intending to infuse that into this platform as well. And so you may see that in conversation and in any of the media. So keep that in mind. Tonight we have a very special guest. We have Mr. Robert Yates, the 2023 former mayoral candidate for the Libertarian Party. And say hello to everyone.
How's it going? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's my absolute pleasure. I would love to start off by asking that you share more about yourself, and then I will let everyone know or further expound upon how we, unless you want to do it, how we met. And I guess the most obvious, most people would presume, of course, that we met on the political campaign trail, but more specifically, how we've been building a friendship.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so tell us more about you, and then we'll jump into that as well.
So it all started on a cold winter day, 43. Yeah, Rob Yates. I'm from DC originally, which I think is where I developed my, I don't want to say hatred, that's a strong word, but contempt perhaps for politicians. I remember watching all the arguments, the debates, and it's like, you're a Washington insider. And I wanted to be like, no, I'm a Washington insider. You all just make my traffic worse. So got married, moved to China for a couple years, came back, and we loved Charlotte. We were looking for a way to get down to Charlotte, and when we found the opportunity, we moved. We've been here for almost 16 years. I have always been politically active in some form, whether it is volunteering, pure activism, less so in the direct politics, just because I worked at either bank jobs or investor jobs. So you either can't be politically involved or you have to fill out a whole bunch of forms. And being a libertarian, telling the government anything is anathema to us. So
yes.
Most people have a became a libertarian story. I've always been a libertarian. In high school, I remember the two issues that really just got to me. And it's not that I'm passionate about them, but one was gay marriage being illegal. And it was, I just couldn't get past this idea that well, okay, let's say for the sake of argument that it really is this immoral, deadly sin. So that's not my business, And the other one was weed being illegal. And I had friends. I've lost 5 friends to drunk driving, but nobody seemed to care about alcohol. But God forbid you get the munchies and laugh harder at a movie. Then in 1998, watching Ron Paul in the debates, I realized it gave a name to what I was, and I have been fully engaged as a libertarian since then. I'm the communications director for the Libertarian Party of North Carolina. And after much consideration, and to be fair, when I decided to run for mayor, the only person on the ballot was Vi Lyles. So Lucille had obviously not registered yet, neither had Beeson for the Republican Party. But I was just, we're what? The 7th or 8th biggest city in the country, and there's one person on this ballot. That's not. We can argue about the validity of democracy, voting. There's all this philosophical stuff, but we're not even pretending to try if that's the situation.
Correct. You got it. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's when I went and signed up, and I saw you and Lucille, and you were really nice to me. You were like, "Oh, it looks like your first time registering to run," and I was like, "Yeah, what are y'all running for?" Lucille was like, "Mayor," and I was like, "Hey, me too." And we got some good pictures up on my website. So
yes, it was a good vibe, and I'm glad that you brought up the point that I was nice to you, because I'm always telling people, and you already know this about me, I'm always sharing this in all of the arenas for either professional academic, professional political arena, the community, that we can at least be cordial. And we do not have to agree on everything, but we can be kind to one another. And I feel like if those principles, that general aspect of character is not in place, then I don't think that anyone should be in a position of leadership, albeit community or political wise, because that is an inseparable component when you're talking about character and representing people in a supposedly, as you touched upon, which I'm very sure we'll touch upon it, in a supposedly highly regarded democratic, society. You can't be anything opposite than having some form of a stronghold to that type of character, because it is an indication, it's insight into how you work with others. And then when you're talking about a democratic society, you're not going to have a monolithic thought process. You're not going to have everyone should not be thinking the same. We should not be in the zombie apocalypse that we're in. And you should be able to communicate with others. Now, the funny thing is that these are skills that are required very often, very specifically required for professional academic qualifications, for professional industries, banking industries.
Anything with a career path from blue collar to white collar.
You got it. So the irony, the sheer irony, but then, when you get to the political arena, you've got just a bunch of assholes running around who think, who are power hungry, and they want to stay in office for what reason? It's just absolutely mind blowing. So equally, you were kind to me, and generally my kindness is not reciprocated. So I find my tribe, if you will, in those individuals, my tribe, as it relates to the political arena, which then spills over into life. You know what I mean? If you've got your mind right, of course it's going to spill over into your life. And so you also were kind to me, and that was a breath of fresh air. Well, and here we are. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it read very genuine. I didn't read anything that was like, okay, he's disingenuous. I didn't read any of that. And you have continued to be exactly that. Even when we've had discussions like our text, and we may not agree about, something, we can still have the conversation.
We are both pretty passionate.
Yes, exactly. But still, I still respect your opinion, very much so. And I'm very thankful for my upbringing that taught me, my parents taught me to respect different opinions and different perspectives. And respect doesn't mean that you have to now, second guess your entire, core values, but it also means that you can check your core values as you continue to grow and live and experience, because sometimes you do need to check your core values and you need to incorporate that, because that's the whole point of growth. But all that being said, go ahead.
Well, it's an application of your values. So you think you're being a certain way, but you have to look at the world and see how are they reacting to me?
Yes.
And if the immediate reaction is off-putting, then it doesn't mean that you are an off-putting person. I hate sort of ascribing those, like, you are something.
Right.
You're doing something, and it's making people react a certain way. And if you want a different reaction, then you have to act differently. Then there's no judgment on it. But you make a good point. Like, we have become friends. We talk a lot, and we're both hyper political, and yet we manage to not talk about politics a lot and talk about politics a lot.
Exactly. It's great. It is, like I said, I can only refer to it best as a breath of fresh air. And I've been able to do that equally with Lucille, which has been so refreshing. Now, I do have good rapport with few other politicians in this area, but not to the extent where I would liken it to a breath of fresh air, or I would be texting back and forth with them. It's just been on the surface, and I can at least, you know, in those situations, I can at least appreciate that they're consistently kind. Now, you know how I feel about fake, though. So I don't know if I would go any further to speak on those relationships outside of that. You know, they're at least trying to be professional and cordial. Now, well, you know what? I'm going to have to take that back, because there is one gentleman, Michael Johnson. Let me make sure I have his name correct. Michael Johnson and Juanrique and Claire. So, okay, so the point that I'm making is, in this last election cycle, of course, I ran for school board at large. And that, by that group,
there were the three. Like the three that they were accused of being GOP backed. I don't think that's true, but they were definitely running as a ticket. They were coming from a different perspective. Without question. And I appreciated the fact that they were a unified front. I appreciate that, and we can get into that. The reason why I appreciate that they were a unified front is because, having some experience with Albright, who I've had conversations, you know, off record, in real life, you know, I've had more personal interactions with Lucille, and so that's why we have the rapport that we have. But I would say second in line would definitely be Albright, because I've definitely seen her in passing very often throughout the years, you know, because she's the real deal. Like, she's, oh yeah, although I got to chat with her a few times, and she's just, and asked when I didn't agree on something, she wanted to know why. There wasn't pushback. She's like, that's interesting, tell me more. And then wanted to explain her side. I was like, hey, this is a conversation. This is, you got it. And so with those individuals, see, I have been on the campaign trail with Albright before, but not in the same race. So we would only be in passing if she were running, you know, because you know how the forums are, they're very race specific typically. So if it's a mayoral forum, then that's normally the only candidates that show up. And so in this particular case, I was around her a lot more along the campaign trail. And so the point that I'm getting at is that those individuals generally in my race this year, I was stinking impressed with, because I have not ever said that you cannot make a bad decision, but you can make a best decision. Referring to myself, of course. Now, of course, there were some questionable, and I want your input for your race, and then and other races as well. I want you to share your insights for each race, whichever one you feel you want to. Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about any of them. Okay, awesome. And so the three, well, there were two sets of three for the Democratic Party, and then for, what was it? The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Association of Educators. Okay. And biggest concern is that those three individuals, and we all know who we're talking about. We're talking about Lenore Shipp. We're talking about Monty Witherspoon, and Shemai. Okay. Yeah. And then I can picture all their faces. I'm so bad at names. That was a Democratic choice, right? And then you have the Monty Witherspoon, Lenore Shipp, and Liz Monterey was the choice for CMAE. Okay. So my contention with those choices were, of course, those choices were based upon denigrating other candidates. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't notice.
You know, I keep it real, honey. I keep it real. None of the candidates were controversial. None of us. Even if you wanted to, uh, of course, they tried to drag my name, with regards to the 162 cases in 72 counties, but you look stupid in so doing. But there's no one that was actually controversial. Those sets of three, however, my contention with them is that they did not disturb the status quo.
So that's
Go ahead.
You say they're not controversial, but I wonder if that was more by design.
Yes, correct. I
There's
agree.
this sort of, if we don't stir anything up, then we're gonna end up exactly how we want.
You got it. You got it. You got it. And that's exactly what my contention was centered on. It was very concerted, very concerted, and it was so conspicuously concerted that would be the realm of the level of fake that I'm allergic to. So in that regard, I cautioned, I cautioned as many who were within the sound of my voice, within the reach.
I can attest to that.
I tried my best, but the funny thing is I saw individuals, I posted or reposted, shared community leaders post advocating to the community leaders, well-renowned community leaders, sharing, hey, choose one of these four people. And my name was in the runnings. But the irony is that how do you have my name in the runnings with those who do not disturb the status quo? And unfortunately, for some people, they presume that status quo is at least not bad. I don't subscribe to that philosophy of thought. Complacency to me, complicit to me, is equal to corruption to me. Very much so.
More than that, in this case, status quo was bad.
Yes.
So the thing that, because I've been much more focused on state level politics, and certainly, so I join almost every council meeting by Zoom. I'm interested. There's always weird ones that sneak through. There was one like 2 months ago where the police they have automatic access to like pawn shops, electronic records.
Yes.
And I don't know that was a huge overreach, but no one pushed back. And I'm just like, we should be questioning these things. But it was education that got me motivated here. Because I'm looking at our test scores, and it's like 41% of kids are reading at third grade. We have a school board that talks DEI all the time, and 13% of Black and Hispanic kids are reading in third grade.
Right.
Like when I was at Bank of America, like anything less than a 95% success rate, and like your boss is having a tough conversation with you, like your job's on the line, and they're like, oh, 41%, no big deal. Like we're failing our children. We're failing them miserably. And so to put forth this argument that the status quo is what must be, and anyone pushing back is somehow acting out of like some nefarious or self-driven interest. Well, that's because everyone I know on the right and the Republican side, I was promoting you, and they'd ask, what are Tigris's positions? And I was like, I'll tell you this, you're probably not going to agree with most of them, but I promise you, she's going in there to change things. And if something stops working, then she's willing to adjust. She's going in there for the kids. This is not self-interest. This is not promoting of an ideology or a standard. She wants to see our children be able to read by third grade. This is not a political game.
And to think that is a benchmark that has not yet been met is deplorable. And to think that, and I hate to say this, but it is very necessary for us to, as people in general, as the body, as we the people, the proverbial and the legal, literal classification of we the people in this democratic society, failing to exercise our voice through a very simple process. Very simple process.
And you have weeks to
We
do it at
have
this point.
completely, we've made it into this intimidating, very stressful, anxiety-inducing process, and it's straightforward. It's very straightforward. And yet a lot of us, we tout that, oh, I can read through the BS, and I know I can choose the right candidate, and I know who. Well, then do it.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.
You see the change agents, we stand out like a, like it, we are very conspicuous on the ballot. Very conspicuous is our language. Even though you and I are not in the same party, it is very clear when we're speaking and about which we speak that we are not part of the status quo.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the fascinating thing. And you and Lucille sort of enlightened me to how significant this was, but because there's not really, I mean, there's Republicans in Charlotte, of course, but it's not a strong presence. Libertarian Party's growing, but we remain the smaller party. The Democrats are kind of split. Like and it's a pretty substantial split, and you saw it come out in a few places. I was amazed. My district with Renee Johnson and was it Will
Tariq.
Russell?
Mm-hmm.
Tariq was Stephanie Hand. Yeah, for the primary.
Yes.
Because Vi endorsed Will Russell, and that became like a huge thing. And Renee and I, probably, if you were to write down our political philosophies, we're not going to align, but I was out there supporting her every way I could because she fought for District 4.
Right.
That's like decentralization. That's the whole thing. She didn't like the city council just saying, no, you're going to have more apartments put here. And I understand there's an affordable housing crisis.
Right.
I understand we need to build more if we want cheaper housing. That's the only thing that's ever worked. You get density, or you get sprawl, or you get more expensive houses. Fine. This is pretty basic economics.
Right.
But when you have the council, they don't want more in their district. So they're just like, hey, there's valuable land here, and we can jack up the taxes, and we don't have to worry about making traffic worse, or longer wait times for police or ambulance, or doctor's offices taking 2 more days to get in, or schools being overtapped. And what was the most amazing thing to me that Renee pointed out is they'd have all these projects and they'd get approved and they'd have an impact report. But there was never an aggregate impact report. So you'd have 7 approvals, and it was like, and I get that each one sort of addresses its own problems. So there's some degree of aggregation, but when you're adding that many things and it's like these massive apartment complexes, traffic goes way up. It gets way worse. Hospitals get overtapped. Schools get worse. Crime goes up. And
necessarily
just the fact that, because people are like, oh, so I was pointing out with some of the apartments, we've seen more crime. And this is not like, there's no racial element, there's no poverty element. There's more teenagers. That's what it is.
correct.
And I was a teenager. I did bad things. Now we've got a lot more of it in a concentrated area. So like, if that's what you're going to do, acknowledge it and adjust at the very least. And Renee is out there saying that, and the developers didn't like it. And we have a lot of non-North Carolina developers putting a lot of money into these raises.
This is I guess you've quickly realized that this, and please continue, but I want to interject this. This is a developer simping city. This city simps for developers, honey. And we can touch upon that as far as the science element, as far as the environmental health, score, if you will, of Charlotte, which is fast decreasing very fast. But go ahead.
No, so that's because I filled out one of the surveys for Sustain Charlotte, and it was asking about tree canopy cover and what's your plan to fix it, and what do you see what's going wrong? And I was like, well, for starters, 3 years ago we were told we want to be at 50%. We were at 49. Now we're at 46. So the government's lost 3 percentage points, but they've written a whole report about why that's a success. And like, as a libertarian, to me, only the government could decline
do that
and be like, no, we're doing much better.
Right. And a lot of this is, again, and I'm using, I love to use, on trend terms so that when we're speaking, and this is not to insult anyone's intelligence from any generation, but it's also to make sure that you understand just how simple and this process, our election system process, really can be, and how we can wield it as we the people to our true consensus. Because the irony is that the consensus is we want environmental quality. Even if you don't understand all the nuances, the academic expertise, from my arena, or you don't have the kind of working knowledge of it, from, any other arena, if you will, you still know that you want clean air, and you want clean water, and you don't want Duke Energy continuing to pollute my precious wetlands. You don't want all those things. You understand that generally.
You sure as hell don't want to pay for it too.
Right. Exactly. And you don't want to have your taxes raised in that regard. And the irony is exactly what you're saying. They don't go out and vote. But then the next year they and I'm going to say I feel that there's kind of two lanes of traffic of thought, if you will. So after the election, it's the whole group that's like, I forgot, life be life. And it was not, on my primary list of things to do. Politicians are corrupt. They just throw out all of those kind of catchphrases that really boil down to excuses as to why you were not vested, why you completely divested as a rightful owner of this democratic process. And
it's
then
your
you
voice.
You got it. And then you have, and I guess I should say 3 lanes of traffic, because the third lane, of course, is the status quo. That's the group of people that they don't even have to, at this point, they don't even have to. I would imagine that if we were allowed into those secret rooms, jokingly, where they say, hey, this is what y'all do. You do exactly what we say to do, and it benefits us all. They don't even ask any questions anymore. They just come out, and you can see it. I've pointed out the math. It's about 35,000 of them. And the irony is that is nearly synonymous, Robert, with the number of city and county employees.
Sounds about right.
Crazy when you think of it. The number is like near spot on. Then you have the other group. And these are a very interesting group of people, because they are very politically informed, and they still don't come out and vote.
That's the frustrating one. I know there's everyone loves to be like, go vote, don't forget to vote. There's a big push to vote. And I actually say it's not that you should go vote, go educate yourself, learn about the issues. Then it won't be a question. Of course you'll go vote. And more than that, instead of it being a popularity contest, you can hold people accountable for doing what they say they're going to do, or what they not doing what they say they're going to do.
Correct.
Because the race, and you alluded to it earlier, but the one that blows my mind was District 6. That was Tariq Bakari and Stephanie Hand in District 6. $750,000 on a race for one city council seat that pays like $40,000 per year, with 122,000 people in the population.
So what does it tell you?
That means it's worth that much money to somebody.
You got it. Corruption. You got
100%. And it's not even, it's like, I'm not saying Tariq's corrupt. I'm not saying Stephanie's corrupt. I'm not saying they're not. I'm saying the whole system.
I'll say it. Both of them are corrupt. Go ahead. Continue.
It's not, I'm not defending them either. My point is, like, it's the system. Like, we have a system. It's a pay-to-play system.
Agree, because they are not, I will agree with you wholeheartedly there. Neither Tariq nor Stephanie are the power, if you will. It's not in their hands. They are, you got it. They are, I wouldn't even say puppets at this point, because they are willfully there. So they are co-conspirators at this point.
That's a good word.
I
I was gonna
wouldn't.
say actors,
Yeah, 'cause I'm
actors
not
in a
going to
big
give them a
play.
pass. Go ahead. What'd you say?
I was gonna say actors in a big play.
You
For me,
got
it's not about giving them a pass or not giving them a pass. There are
yeah.
some politicians I certainly have much more strong feelings against than others, but the whole system, the whole idea that Duke can spill coal ash into the river and then pay regulators to prevent them from being sued over it, essentially.
I find it disgusting. So, and here's my insight in that regard. I'll do my best to give it to you in like 2 minutes, and then I definitely want to hear your input, because you know that I have I don't have a bird's eye view. I have a front row seat
Yeah.
as an environmental scientist, and particularly a wetland scientist in this area. So I have even suffered political bullying through my PhD program, which of course my dissertative research was focused on the preservation of wetlands in North Carolina. I was attacked at every angle from the agriculture, commissioner of agriculture, just so many different arenas. My advisor pushed back and wanted me to not have my study elicit responses from
Jeez.
the citizens, and instead they wanted me to have the environmental leaders of North Carolina respond to my questionnaires. What? It would be completely biased. It would be inarguably biased to send out my questionnaires to the environmental leaders of North Carolina to answer questions about the valuation.
Yeah, yeah.
Honestly enough, the public valuation, because public valuation is a very specific term, and I know you know it. That term is about eliciting responses from the public, not from environmental leaders.
Not empirical, yeah.
And they wanted me to write them in, to use my skill set to fake the funk, if you will, and write them in as stakeholders, and as a valid study. You gotta find somebody else. And not only that, I don't know if you know this, I'm also a registered business for state contracts. Okay. So I was disgusted last year. I received 3 bidding opportunities, and each one of them was effectually to remediate the damage done by Duke Energy to river basins all throughout the North Carolina. And I'm going to be honest with you. This is the first time I'm saying this out loud live. My close family knows this. I completely botched it, because I wanted to see what their response would be. I'm not going to tell you how to fix them so that you can not do it right, or so that you can manipulate the process and then beguile the general public as to what you have done, especially also knowing that it is very unlikely that you're going to select my company, albeit hub certified, and I'm the prime, I would be the great candidate, for winning this bid to clean up, the bad that has been done here with the wetlands in North Carolina. I'm not going to save your ass. I'm looking at this, and I have been telling people that these are and at this point, and I think the next time we talk, I know we're going to be doing this often based on our conversations, and I'm so looking forward to it. I am willing to actually show the details for those bids, because they're not confidential. They can't be confidential.
That'd be awesome.
Huh?
I'd love it. I'd love to see that. Sorry, my light's going on. I'm plugging this in.
Oh, no problem at all. And so it was very disgusting to see the extent of pollution, the extent we know what we have read, general public knows what they have read in articles that are published in maybe the Charlotte Observer or the Winston-Salem Journal, all those type of things. Reading it through the lens of a scientist and as this bid, and we're talking about from NC Dinner. So this is, and now it's DEQ, environmental quality.
Okay.
Department of Environmental Quality instead of environmental and natural resource, Okay. So that being said, that is the agency, that is the state agency that is charged with the duty to do this in the first place. And so basically you're handing off the duty to be done by another agent. And I use agent loosely because Robert, in these realms, obviously as a wetland scientist, I'm going to, especially as a wetland scientist, we're extremely rare, okay? I'm going to know most of, if not all, the wetland scientists in North Carolina that would be eligible to even bid on this. The point that I'm making is that the people who were bidding on this are underqualified to serve in this capacity.
Probably at best. That's probably being kind.
I tried. I was being very kind with my words right there. You could probably hear it in the intonation. They are underqualified to tackle that. And the irony is that they are being given the opportunity by the state that is charged to do it, that has the experts in-house to do it. So the fact that we think that it is cute, this is what my mom would say. Oh, you think it's cute to not be vested, to not take things seriously. You think that's cute? Well, it's going to catch up with you. And that's what's happening, exactly what you're saying. And it's happening incrementally so and increasingly detrimentally so. So when we look at the percentage, and if some of you are thinking that, oh, well, if we go from 50% to 46%, as Robert has noticed with regards to environmental quality, that doesn't mean, don't look at that 4% as, oh, I'm going to look at it mathematically. No, honey, child.
It's a decline and a failure. Yeah.
You got it. That's bad.
I think it speaks to something larger. And this is so libertarian philosophy, like if it's about, like, if it's government, I'm against it, right? But there are some parts of it that I find particularly bad. And I've proposed a constitutional amendment to the effect of no government agency at any level in any branch of government can indemnify, insure, or deem immune from prosecution or litigation any agency in which it has a pecuniary interest. So this goes for polluters, this goes for the vaccine manufacturers, this goes for cops, this goes for prosecutors, because of course people with financial interests are going to try and buy regulators to get advantageous rulings. And the truth is that that's really not necessarily bad or good. There's trade-offs. There's just outcomes from those laws. But when you block them from accountability, there's no upside. People can act with impunity, and they do. They act with impunity all the time because they have no fear of consequence whatsoever. What's the worst? They're going to get a slap on the wrist, a fine that the shareholders end up paying. And that's something
we call it a pay-to-play tax.
That's 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
We were talking about yesterday this situation in Charlotte where this woman was perhaps smoking weed.
Yeah.
And I just see there's a video with 4 cops on top of her and one's just wailing on her. And like, then they're talking about departmental policy. Well, do you know what's not the law is your departmental policy?
Correct.
It's like if I had a sign at my house that was like, I can shoot you in the foot if I want, and call it a departmental policy. There's no law that allows you to just beat up a woman who's being held down. That's correct. This isn't a cop. That's a criminal to me. That is a criminal. And we should be treating it that way. Don't hide behind departmental policy.
Correct.
But we are so, I don't know, terrified of what's on the other side and beholden to these institutions. We don't want to see the cracks in them. And it doesn't have to go all the way. Like, I'm not a defund the police. I'm not anti-police. I want to see bad people held accountable, whether they're wearing a uniform or not. That
It's
shouldn't be a
straightforward.
controversial issue.
Correct. At all.
But and sure enough, like you look online and half the side's like ACAB and the other half's like, no, he's just doing his job. And it's like, how
No, he's
about this is a bad guy doing, and do you know what? Maybe he is generally a good person and he snapped. And then there should be some sort of like if I'm a good person my whole life and I get in a fight and I get arrested, then I go to court and I have to pay my restitution. Like that's what the legal system's for.
And I'm going to say to
Why?
you, those situations are definitely one-off. And I'm saying that you're now being very kind, but go ahead.
I do. I there's a quote the Dalai Lama said, and I can't even be sure that it was from the Dalai Lama, but it was written on the whiteboard in the YMCA in Mooresville where I used to swim, and it was be kind whenever possible. It is always possible. And so I'm
Correct.
sort of like, if I want the world to be a kinder place, then I should try at least to bring that in. So with police in particular, I can find myself getting worked up really fast. And it's because they have the power to take life and liberty and they get supported by the state. They should be held to the highest standards and they're often not.
You got
So
it.
I really, really work to like give every benefit of the doubt. I would hold someone else just on the facts of this situation. So that's what I'm doing in this one. But the facts of this situation, like there's a video and they're
Correct.
like, when the rest of the body cam footage comes out, it'll explain stuff. What will explain? It doesn't
Correct.
matter what happened before. She is now being held down by 4 other cops. And you're just
Correct.
punching her.
There's absolutely no justification, and policy is that is an insufficient excuse, because if policy, let's go back to the statement that you made with regards to, because you touched upon it without calling it what it is called in legal jargon. So they use governmental immunity. They always assert, that, I have governmental immunity. No, you don't, when your policy, any law, in fact, and I remind people all the time about this, any law, even a state law on the books, a statutory law, if it is contrary to the Constitution, it is legally void on its face.
Nullification. Libertarians love nullification.
But many of us don't know this, so we don't assert it, right? And so we think, oh, well, I guess they're doing what they say, that they can, because then they dress it, right? They put the window dressing over it and call it governmental immunity. And then we often don't see those type of cases litigated properly until we have a do-good attorney or an do-good attorney firm or do-good legal advocate organization under organizational standing, which allows leaders of an organization to sue on behalf of their members. You see what I mean? And then they take it to the Supreme Court, and then everyone says, oh, see, I knew that they were in the wrong. I knew they didn't have the power. Please, anyone within the sound of our voices right now, understand that any law, even a law on the books, which means it's in there right now.
Voted on, conscribed, passed.
All the things. If it does not comply with, if it is opposite, contradicts in any way, even nuance-wise, if it contradicts the Constitution, it is void on its face. Period. And that is the argument.
This is a really good point. So my neighbor's very political, and he would probably align a lot with you. Like he says he toys with socialism sometimes, which is a fun conversation to have. But we have some very strong feelings about the police together. Yeah. And he made an interesting remark where he asked a cop friend of his, at what point does your authority, at what point do my rights end in deference to your authority?
Correct.
And the cop started giving him an answer, and he was like, no, my rights never end.
At all.
Like, the things that you are enabled to do, the courts have determined do not violate my rights. So if I'm being detained for a reasonable period of time under suspicion of a crime, that's not a violation of my rights. That's still within the bounds of the Fourth Amendment. Right. What people don't realize is you can give up your rights. If they
Correct.
say, can I search you? And you say no, then they can't search you. But if you
Correct.
say yes, you have now given that up. And cops are trained to do this.
You got it. And the irony, and I'm glad that you're bringing this up as well. So the versatility of my background, I often like to share my input so that people also see I don't have a bird's eye view in that regard as well. As a former federal ranger, and that scope of duties necessarily being law enforcement. Like, I didn't go in with the intentions of being in law enforcement at all. Completely, I'll admit that. There was no intentionality in that regard. But that's what that scope of work entails. And I relearned over and over again, and exactly what you stated. My superintendent, we all were my fellow law enforcement rangers, my fellow resource education rangers. We were all under a constant checks and balances, constant. And we had federal authority, prevailing federal authority. And yet could not, as you've already stated, could not infringe upon the rights of even illegal immigrants crossing
Your
over
rights
the border.
in America, you're in this country, you have those rights.
Yeah, we could not. As soon as they crossed over, we had to exercise care under the law to which we were enjoined.
Which people like, because you see, so I watch the videos, the First Amendment auditors, and you see a lot of the comments like, if you just comply, like, stop stirring it up. And it's like, no, it's important that we stir it up.
Correct.
Because our country is far from perfect, but I love this country. I love the ideals that this country is founded on.
Yes.
If we don't continue to ensure that those are observed, then they go away.
Yeah.
You can become a police state really, really fast.
Exactly.
And fear can do it. Fear can do it really quickly. And that's what politicians thrive on. You see they want to stir up fear on which politician you support, which party you're in. They want to stir up racial division. They want to stir up gender division. And like, the truth is, sit down with the person who seems the most opposite from you and don't talk about politics. And in 10 minutes, you'll realize, like, you have way more in common than you thought.
And I'm so glad you're saying this, Robert, because I posted and I won't be able to get to it very quickly, so I won't even try to, but there's an image that I posted. It was a meme that I reposted. And it wasn't talking about it politically, but it was talking about, like, if we all come together and we come together on those common belief systems, right? Because, like you said, we have more in common than we do oppositely. Okay. And so you've got all these little fish in this meme making up this larger fish. And nice. They're going against this shark, this big bad, beast. And of course, proverbially, we're and metaphorically, we're likening the big shark to all the bad and corruption of our government and society. You got it. And here we are, all the little fish, where you think that you have no power, you actually have all of it.
We have all of it, yeah.
If you just exercise it, if we stop fighting about the little things that are not the big picture. At the end of the day, we all want the same fundamental rights. And that's what we should come together on. And we will completely rule democratically the essential functions of the government if we were to do it. It's sad that we have 90-year-old, 80-year-old legislators in the White House right now who literally have no clue. And I'm not talking about ageism. We're talking about it as a
dementia, Alzheimer's.
Yeah, but no, and I'm not even talking. We can definitely touch upon that because that's relevant. No, it's relevant. It's laughable, but it's also relevant because we think of the retiring age for blue and white collar jobs at around 70, right? But so why are we allowing this for our most important positions for government, the functions of government? And this is not to denigrate anyone who becomes 70. I am looking forward to turning 90. I want to be 90 one day. I think it's a blessing. I think it's a great achievement in life to make it to that point, and especially have your mental faculties or health or general, just general health. But the point I'm making is that those individuals should not be there. I'm talking about a function of stagnation.
Yeah, 100%.
You're there. A lot of people don't even know their legislators at that level. Don't even know them. They're there and they keep getting voted in by the corrupt status quo, because those are the same people that are going to, I've been voting for John for the last 15 years. So I just vote for John again.
Of course.
We do. Seen him at church 2 weeks ago. Got to vote for John.
Yeah.
What?
It's a popularity contest. You were talking about it.
It's a popularity contest at this point. It is just literally that is our zombie apocalypse.
Yeah,
our literal
the motions.
Zombie apocalypse is, well, I just feel bad if I don't vote for him. I saw Carol Ann at the potluck. I need to vote for her, because she's running again. And the funny thing is, they do things very much so like the Southern stereotype. They say, "Oh, bless her heart, I don't know why the hell she's still running, because her ass need to sit down somewhere, but I'm gonna go ahead and vote for her anyway." What?
I laugh, but you're right. You're 100% right.
It's terrible. It's terrible. And then, I want to spend the rest of tonight's live on that topic. I want you to go into more detail, because I've given a little lightheartedness, but I'm very serious as it relates to injustice. And I'm very glad that there were other blue lives, because I have spoken out and said that I am both, quote unquote, by qualifications, by experience, I'm a blue and a black life. And I believe that it's important when those of us who have that duality, we speak out about it so that it is understood. And I think it's important when there's a blue life who also is, part of the majority ethnic group, albeit, gender or race. Speaking of, the most forward, to mind would of course be the white male. When white male law enforcement officers come forward and they say they were wrong, these are the types of affirmations we need to hear. The stronghold to constitutional rights and provisions. These are the things that need to be in place. And we need to see more of this so that we can actually clean house from our police departments, sheriff's departments, FBI, any agency with law enforcement duties or authority, judicial figures. It needs to happen, because otherwise, just like you said, if it goes unchecked, then they continue upon their behavior. And that's why we're saying that you're being kind, because psychology teaches that when you see someone's pattern, if they've done it, like, again, now, if it's a one-off occasion, we see, okay, fine. But generally, as psychology has taught, generally, when we see that person and it comes to the light that person has done something terribly, they have committed an inhumane act, how often do we also find out very quickly that they have a history of so doing?
Well, so you make a good point there. So I have a pretty extensive psychology background, and that's where the whole comms and marketing thing came in. So you say inhumane, and it's not that I disagree. It's that I don't know that that's a useful term in this situation, because we think it's inhumane. It doesn't mean that someone else thinks it's inhumane.
Correct. I agree.
Instead of sort of putting a qualifier, we just have to say these actions are acceptable and these are not. And if we held people to that standard, what I think you would see is, for example, I can very much accept that if there are police in like a high stakes situation, there's kidnap victims or a serial killer coming after them, things get violent, like, okay, then you get the benefit of the doubt. But right now you don't have the benefit of the doubt because you tased that dude to death in Raleigh for sitting in his car. He's sitting in his car eating McDonald's. Or Jade Jackson in Fayetteville a few years ago, shot in the back 22 times.
Yes.
Or Joshua Rohrer arrested in Gastonia 2 years ago. It's on. It took us 9 months of fighting for it, but we finally get the body camera footage. They said, give us your ID. He handed the ID, and then they tased him. And then they said, your dog bit me. The dog's 6 feet away.
Right.
They tase the dog. The dog ends up getting killed by a car, and then Joshua tries to take his own life because he has nothing but a service dog. And this is a man whose brain has been destroyed fighting for us in Iraq. But like, the system, we got to back the system, and everyone's backing the system, and Travis Page is backing the system, and Josh Stein's backing the system, and we're pretending like these parties matter. We're going to get mad at someone for being in the other party, and it's a distraction. It's a giant distraction.
And so the reason why I agree with you, so academically, and I think this is what definitely blesses our friendship, if you will, because we can have a meeting of the minds academically and personally, and then politically, if you will. All those arenas, they come together. The point that I'm making is, having that extensive background in psychology, it is appropriate to not give it that label. I get that. But for the purpose of statute.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
There needs to be, how you're talking about. So definitely I agree there should be a decriminalization of weed, right? For obvious reasons. But then when we're talking about certain acts upon another person, they're already defined by law as inhumane.
Yeah.
And so that language needs to be consistent with policies that
I gotcha. In its actual quantitative form. Like this means
You got it. So yes, in the because in the psychological field, you can't just label someone and because it's definitive and there's no rehabilitation nature of it. And that's the whole point of behavioral psychology is to study and understand human behavior and then manage it. And also the ideal outcome, the ideal goal is to correct it, right? Or to
rehabilitate. Would you say in a way that lets people flourish too?
Correct.
It's not, yeah.
You got it. So I agree with you there. But and of course, it's not ever going to say literally inhumane in the legal statute either. It's not. But I'm just sharing that terminology. If an assault is an assault, then assault should still be an assault if it is a law enforcement.
Yeah, that doesn't matter.
Right. If someone in law enforcement committed said assault, if they committed the same act that is defined by law as assault, because of course the law does not allow you to act outside of the scope of your authority. And I want to say that again. Excuse me, y'all. Some of you know I posted earlier, I'm recovering from a cold. I do not
Glad you're feeling better.
Thankfully. Yeah, I went and I got me some prednisone. So I definitely am feeling better. So forgive me for having to clear my throat. But the point that I'm making there is that also in the law, and I was very excited to learn this in law school. Law school for me was, and anyone within the reach of this, please feel free to comment in this regard. And Robert, I'd like your input in this regard as well. So I was, as someone who had already been in the legal arena, I've got more experience in the legal arena than your average law student, right? And that's just because I was a business owner. So I had a rapport of maybe initiating small claims actions here and there for slow pay customers, things like that. Just simple, straightforward stuff. Nothing super major, right? And then get into the political arena and then reading about environmental policy, which is going to be essential, even more so than a lot of other of my peers in different fields of applied science. A wetland scientist research necessarily entails an economic and a law component.
Of course, especially in North Carolina.
You got it, because you're talking about preservation of a very specific natural resource, right? So it's explicit to my field. So I've had a lot more, of that experience, if you will, that exposure to it. That being said, I was like, okay, I'm so excited to see how much am I right on, because you often, individuals like myself who are very outspoken and very resolved about, justice and equity and things of that nature, you're always going to have the naysayers. They're always going to be the ones, oh, no, you're misinterpreting that. You didn't finish. You haven't been to law school yet, so you don't know. You misinterpreted that. You'll learn. And the irony is that I learned that my understanding of every aspect of law as it relates to those things was accurate. And not only accurate, Robert, but it, again, as I pointed out before, with regards to any law that contradicts the Constitution is void on its face. That's in the law. That's written into the law. Okay. Equally, there is a very specific, they're called elements. And you may have heard this. So when you want to take somebody to court and you say, hey, I say they defamed me. Well, what are the elements of defamation? And all that means is, what are the rules that apply that allow you to tell the court, hey, they committed defamation against me? So the point I'm making here is that when you're talking about assault, when you're talking about false imprisonment, when you're talking about conspiracy, when you're talking about fraud, when you're talking about, even if a judge makes a decision, right, under the guise of adjudication on the merits, and all those fancy terms, y'all, just mean that judge heard your case during trial, and then they ruled upon and made a judgment, and it was entered, it was ordered, right? Okay, it's a very specific element that is written into case opinion. So it is well settled law that says that if someone with governmental immunity is acting beyond the scope of their authority, or even acting under the color of law with their authority, and they do wrong, it's even worse. They are definitely exposing themselves to criminal liability. And generally, based on this application of that element, they have no viable defense against criminal liability. Yet here we are with police officers that continue to persist. Oh no, I got governmental immunity. I'm good.
The qualified immunity doctrine is horrible.
It's ridiculous.
And it's how far it has gone.
Yeah.
Is what's really horrible. So I'm against it 100%. I would get rid of qualified immunity, but I can see a case for a very small amount of it where like something unintentional and not serious happens, and then someone comes and says my civil rights were violated, and the cop is like,
but it doesn't need to be written in. You realize that, right? Because
in
when
terms
you talk
of
about law, everyone wants to make law so difficult. It's not. It's very straightforward. It's very mathematic, in fact. It's very mathematic. And so there's no need to write in and say, if the judge made a decision, but it doesn't breach the threshold of considering it to be corruption, then therefore it's not corruption.
Yeah.
That's a math equation. So if it doesn't reach 4, then it's not 5. So then it's
100%.
You should have then it's not 5. We're done. If the judge, if it's just something that you you say, okay, well, it just looks questionable. But if we don't see evidence of fraud, and that already exists, Robert, that is already within the law.
So for the record, I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there is an argument that I can understand.
Okay.
I still disagree with it.
Yeah.
But we're not even in that playing field. It's like cops, they beat somebody half to death, and it's like, oh, but there were two of us. We didn't know that violated his civil rights. And they're like, well, that's never happened before, so qualified immunity.
And therein lies so therein lies the inarguable, viable, and so I'm gonna roll back because I don't want to use big words. Okay, so I'm gonna say, basically, when someone stands by, you have two law enforcement, right? Let's say three, like the scenario you just said, you've got one person that is actually committing the act, right? And then you have two that are standing, but they're standing idly by. The law also speaks to that as well.
Well, that's like the Derek Chauvin thing.
You got it. It also speaks explicitly against that as well. That if you are, and it even says this, some of y'all are not gonna believe me, but we'll dive into this more, and I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you statutes. I'm gonna show you the North Carolina Superior Court judge's bench book that says, I'm gonna show you the North Carolina Bar Association rules of professional conduct that says specifically, if a judge knows of the fraudulent conduct of another judge and does not report it. Where do you think I'm going with this?
But I mean, I doubt that ever happens. Rarely. Because that's my big thing, like my whole thing with cops is Chris Rock has that great joke where he's like, maybe 99% of them are good, but if 99% of airplane pilots can land a plane, I'm still not flying. But right. For me, it doesn't matter how many are good or bad. It's how many are complicit, how many are standing by. Right. What is it's not the evil that men do, it's the evil that good men endure, or something. I forget the exact quote. It's the beginning of the Boondock Saints. It's awesome.
Right.
But it's actually kind of what got me really active in politics. Is like, I just see people getting run over, and we've been harping on cops, but it's everywhere. It's like,
it's judges, attorneys,
it's city councils. You've lived in a house your whole life, and now you can't afford to still live there because they've jacked your property taxes up so much for some project that isn't going to help you, that is costing 200% more than it should.
Yes.
And then you look at like who's taking who out to dinner, and that's not a FEC reporting requirement, so no one knows about that one. And it's just like, I will say this, the most heartening thing, and I did write an article about my experience running, and the thing that I got out of it is like, people are fed up.
Yeah.
And we haven't quite hit the threshold yet, because there's still that like, no, it's the Democrats, no, it's the Republicans.
Correct.
But we're so close. So close.
They're not sick and tired. They're just tired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we'll be there soon. I really do. I really think we'll be there soon. Some of the best connections I've made have been with, like, I've made a bunch of friends in the Forward Party.
Yeah.
Obviously you, Lucille, a lot of what would be like on paper in the mainstream media, like the more progressive elements of the Democratic Party,
which is what I'm considered progressive without question. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't see you that way, and I don't mean that as a compliment or an insult. You want to see things get better.
You got it. I'm objective. I'll be honest with you, and it says it very blatantly, unapologetically on my website. And I'll admit, maybe that is also a reason why some people are like, I'm not really sure if I should vote for her because I don't really know where she stands. I've always been this person, and that's my stance.
Yeah, that's not
like, so I'm not choosing a side because that's childish. I'll be honest, and this is no offense to you having decidedly chosen, Libertarian, or someone having decided Democrat, or someone having decided Republican. or someone having decided independent. I'm going to be completely honest with you and I'm very thankful for my upbringing. I most identify with the Democratic Party because of the democratic ideals, upon which this country was founded. Even we're talking about going beyond
even when it fell short.
Right, you got it. We're talking about going beyond colonialism, which we're not gonna. Don't get it twisted, y'all. I'm still black. Right,
that's a separate episode.
You got it. That's gonna be a separate episode. I'm still black. I'm not excusing colonialism, but I'm saying now we're at a point where we're saying, okay, we all agree that we want a democratic society because no one has successfully effectuated a coup to make it anything else. So that's what we're all rocking with, right? That being said, I really feel I'm a huge advocate for a non-party society, and that you just vote your core beliefs. And I believe that would bring us back to the, like what you referred to before, that we will necessarily focus more on what we have in common, because we know at that point that if anybody can vote any which way, then we know that we need to find the common ground intentionally. We need, so that we can actually be productive. 100%. You know what I mean? And so me saying that it is childish is not so much as saying that it is doltish, and instead saying it is childish because we should be beyond managing our interactions the way children do. You see what I'm saying? Like
they're better. They make up.
Right. That's my point. It's like, okay, so I like your shoes. So I like your blue shirt. So I'm going to be over here and we're going to be friends till the end. Yay. And that's not serving any of us well. And if I have to be one, and I want to make sure, are you okay with going until 8:30? Because it's 8:11. We've gone over.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
Okay, awesome. And so basically we should be acting well within our evolved selves. And we should not be fearful of our differences. And you, Robert, should not have to put a label on who you are. Because the irony is, you've already expressed, you most identify as libertarian, but we share a lot of the same core beliefs. I identify as democratic, and that is for the logistics of it's the legal tools of the election.
Yeah.
I don't align with the Republican thought generally. I most identify with the Democratic thought, even though there's a history of Black Republicans, and as a daughter of a Black Panther, you would have to, if you understood any of those philosophies that I just referred to, you know that I would agree with Black Republicans from that school of thought. So the point I'm making, though, is that we can't be successful if we continue to think with our less evolved or our less mature selves, if you will. And so it's not in any way, shape, or form to denigrate anyone in their choice. But I think that's why I gravitate toward purple. And at the end of the day, also, I see myself with the Green Party for obvious reasons.
There's alignment philosophically.
You got it. And I definitely I agree with the progressive thought. I agree there. I just am very objective. And it's funny, like if there was an objectivity party, I'd just go ahead and join that right now. But of course, that party would actually have to be, statutorily written in. And, our legislators, and that's another reason why you got to vote, because our legislators are not going to write that in if we're re-electing the corrupt incumbents. So you're not going to get written in. They're not going to favor independence. And you see, I told people about the fact that you can't run successfully. You can't run your independent campaign as successfully as you hope. And you saw that happen in this last election, and they didn't listen to me at all. Oh, we can do it. No, you can't. It is an unwinnable battle, because we're also dealing with the Board of Elections and that group of employees, and they are co-conspirators. And that was the nature of my my election protest. they are in positions, and the staff even know it. I won't divulge that which has been shared with me just yet, but even the
we
staff,
saw. I mean, the Elias law firm suing to keep Matthew Ho off the ballot, to keep the Greens off the ballot. He had no standing to sue whatsoever, but he was worried about Beasley not getting elected, and he's a big Democrat donor. You know, you said something interesting, and I agree with a lot of it about like you should be more than your side. And I sometimes wish libertarians would be like a little bit more on their side. So we come from this principle over party perspective.
yeah,
And I think it is a big part of the reason we have not had more electoral success. Because like anything that could be construed as being part of the system is it's viewed with so much suspicion. And it's like it or not, these are the rules. You don't have to violate your principles, but you
right.
got to play within these confines or it's just going to keep getting worse.
You got
And
it.
we do see a lot of that. And it's
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think so with me, because there is a growing sector and they conceptualize this school of thought that I've explained, and we'll call it the objectivity party. We've created a new term, right? But they most liken it to the independent party. Like if I choose this designation, then I'm good to go. And I've explained to people that designation really says nothing at all, because you can be a Democrat and I can go out and vote for a Republican. I voted for you for mayor.
you got my vote.
So the point I'm making is that there's no statutory limitation by party generally. Now, of course, there are going to be some times where it's a wholly party vote and that's all you'll see on your ballot. But we're talking about generally speaking for at-large races. Honey, you just vote. Go in there and vote any, mini, miny, mo if you want to.
Yeah, it's so, just as good.
So the question I wanted you to touch upon is like, how do we, and this is not to take away from those, because I'm not trying to move you from the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, no.
I don't want anyone to party switch. I want to make this very clear, y'all. As a lawyer, not yet licensed attorney with expertise in law now, I want you to not get ahead of yourself. Don't jump the gun and start switching parties and all that kind of stuff. You can vote however the hell you want to vote in the party that you're in. Chill out. You're good. Don't do it until we actually have statutory a stronghold where it's written in law that we can just be who we are. We can just let our objectivity flag fly and just be who you are. Then at that point, then hopefully none of us will have to designate a party, and then you can go in there and I feel, and so this is the question that I'm getting at. Do you feel that it would re-engage voters if they were not limited by party? Now, of course, they're not limited by party, but if they realize, you see what I'm saying? If they actually realize that they're not limited by party and it was written into law that we don't have a Democratic Party anymore, we don't have a Republican Party anymore, we don't have any of those parties. You as a citizen have one vote and you get to vote in every election, and that's it. That's how we run it.
So it's a really interesting question, right? A really interesting thought experiment, because we've seen some of it. And there's some of it going on right now. Look at RFK Jr. declaring independent, and they thought he was just going to steal the election from Biden. Well, first of all, you can't steal an election for being a better candidate, but it looks like he's going to take an equal number of votes from Trump and Biden as of right now. Mm-hmm. From the libertarian perspective, so coming back to psychology, like I hold that there's one simple truth to human behavior, and it's this: people do what they're incentivized to do, and everything else spawns from that. And so power is incentivized to hoard power, which is why I don't trust people in power. Mm. So the political parties, the two big parties, their incentive is to win elections, which means they will do what it takes to win elections. And they're always going to push those boundaries. So while libertarians have been interested in winning elections, our focus has been on, let's say, spreading liberty, which is a broad term, but a lot of legislative reform. In North Carolina, we've been pushing really hard to get body camera laws changed. So those are released right away.
May I say this really quickly? I do want to interject this to everyone within the sound of my voice. That is the one thing that I respect very highly about the Libertarian Party. And Robert has actually, he's embodied that.
Thank you.
And every aspect, every conversation, he's embodied that. They are always more character driven by far than Democrats or Republicans. Go ahead.
Sometimes to our detriment. And I mean, I say that jokingly. We have refocused our strategy in the last couple of years to, okay, let's try to win elections and let's start from the ground up. Let's really look at local elections. Let's actually put some energy into it. But it's really difficult because you can't violate your principles. So like on my mayor campaign, someone was like, could you win this mayor campaign? And I was like, yes. And there are probably 5 things that have to happen. And each one of those things has a worse chance of happening than me winning the lottery. But in that situation, it's possible.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to go out and ask people for a whole bunch of money that I can buy on ads to trash some other person for something that, one, you shouldn't be doing that anyway, but then for something that I can't win. And so I stayed under the $1,000 limit. And I wrote about this in the article. The first thing I learned is like, you want to win,
need lots of
money. And without money, you don't get press attention. Like I'm calling reporters left and right. Reporters I know from the communications director side who have run stuff for us before, but like,
now they won't do it.
Yeah. How many votes do you think you're going to get? They were really, have you talked to anyone in District 6? Because that's like the hot election. Okay, so, and then those sorts of successes, those financial successes, those media successes, and when they say no press is bad press, that's unfortunately a lot more true than people might want to believe. But just getting the media attention gives you more media attention. And those things tend to build. So then not only do you have to be willing to run, you have to be willing to run multiple times. Right. It's the rare person who comes, unless the situation is perfect, and just wins on the first election, and then to run without an RRD next to your name. So one thing that was crazy to me, we had a Libertarian run for city council too, for at large.
Yes.
And he got like
Steve.
22. Yeah, Stephen DeFrey.
I voted for him too. Yeah.
He's a good dude.
Yeah, I did. I didn't vote for anyone else. I think I want to reiterate that because I'm very vocal about who I vote for. I didn't vote for anyone else, not even in my race.
We appreciate it immensely.
No problem. I need to see character. That's my stronghold. And again, I want to say I respect you for that. And that's where I rock hard with libertarians generally. In that specific regard because of that.
We welcome it.
Yes, go ahead.
He got, and I forget the exact numbers, but he got roughly 17,000 more votes than I did.
Yeah.
And no, I probably campaigned harder on the Democrat side. The prominent issues for me right now are ones that I think resonate more with people who traditionally align with the Democrat Party. And that goes back and forth. And that changes whether it's federal or local. But in Charlotte right now, like the things that are bothering me are the things that tend to be bothering Democrats. So I like to think I at least pulled some of those votes. But for the most part, what happened is if you subtract the people who voted for the Republican mayor and give them to Steve, that's the difference.
Correct.
How many of those people knew anything about the person they were voting for? They just went in, they saw a letter, and they pressed the button.
You got it.
And that's a scary thing.
They saw opposite. They saw different from corrupt status quo.
Mm-hmm. And then that's 15% of the total voting population in Charlotte that voted. And do you not realize? So I was against the school bonds, adamantly. Again, don't let government anything. But no matter how you felt about the school bonds, how many people that voted on the school bonds actually knew what those school bonds were earmarked for, or how we're going to pay for them over the next 7 years? And then they're the ones who are going to come back and be like, my school sucks and my property taxes went up. And it's like, how many school board meetings have you gone to? How many times have you met with the principal? Have you ever looked at the budget for CMS or the police stuff? So crime has gone down, but violent crime has gone up and murders have gone way up. Mm-hmm. Now, certainly some of that, I mean, the lockdowns and the unemployment have certainly spurred an increase in crime, but there's been there's been a lack of like concentrated policing, if you will. So some neighborhoods that were safe.
And crime has only gone down, and you did point it out in one regard. So domestic violence skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Because you said violent crimes skyrocketed.
Yeah.
The petty crimes, the reason why they seemingly decreased is because there was less what?
Well, we stopped prosecuting. I mean, they stopped.
You got it. You got less prosecution. So it wasn't that it was less petty crimes. It was they're petty crimes. We ain't got time for that.
Not even worth it.
Right. But go ahead.
So then we're spending, I think we spent $800,000 on an MRAP. So it's like this like armored vehicle that can breach buildings in case of a bomb. Because that happens a lot in Charlotte.
Of course, it happens so much.
This is crazy.
Right.
Police are talking about their morale is at the lowest it's ever been.
Yep.
And then the union, and for the record, we don't technically negotiate with unions in the public sector in North Carolina, which is a nonsense. They 100% do. They just talk through someone. Correct. But the union's coming out and making statements against efforts for community-based policing.
Right.
Like this is we're doing things backwards, and then we act so surprised when the results come out backwards. It's
bad.
Like, I hate to be
bad.
And that's the thing. I hate to be this doomsayer, but like housing is getting way more expensive. Life is getting more expensive, and inflation is not going away anytime soon.
They're not taking care of, they're not maintaining fit premises. They're obfuscating the mutuality of obligations with regards to landlords and what they need to do. Yeah, go ahead. It's terrible.
Those are the ones who can even afford to do it at this point. I mean, things are off the charts. People are hurting. Like people are really hurting. The response we're getting is, oh, he's a Republican, you should hate him. She's a Democrat, you should hate her. Wait a second. Like where's some unity?
Yeah, now you see what I'm saying by, again, I feel that is, and actually you make a valid point in, oppositely, but generally when you think about a child and who they're going to play with, they use very superficial criteria, very superficial. And so that's the point that I'm making in that regard. And we're not serving ourselves. It's just a constant disservice, and we're devolving in a lot of ways. And that's where the hurt is coming from, because no one is feeling safe. They don't feel heard. They don't feel like they're very disillusioned. Like, and then they run to social media where they,
which is the worst possible. That's like taking it and steroids, crack, and gasoline, whatever metaphor you want. And 15 years old, 14 years old, these are kids. They're babies. They should be like getting a fist fight by the sandbox and then shake hands and be friends again the next day.
And that's exactly, and you know what? That is a excellent point to hammer in to close this out. You and I'm 40, I'll be 47 December 5th. Do you mind telling your age?
I turned 43 this year.
So we are in the same generation. The one thing that was very common for our generation is we were the outside generation. And we were the generation that, exactly what you just said, you are expected to settle up with your fellow man. You get in, you may have a tiff. You may very well have a tiff. You may fight it out. And then the next day, you're back friends. Or even later that same day or after the fight, there are people rallying around you who ironically are fueling the fight, but then they're like, okay, that's enough. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to let you get beat to a pulp during this process. Like, that's enough. And there are some very inalienable principles in that for character. Like, you can have beef with your neighbor, but then settle up with your neighbor, make amends.
And be wrong and apologize.
Yeah.
And then life goes on.
And don't take advantage of them when they're down. And find your common ground. And you can't hold a grudge forever. You can't be mad forever. And we're talking about very simple principles of life. And yet we have these grown ass adults in these positions of power, like you're saying, and they have become power hungry. We've got all these Thanoses. We've got all
we really
these
do. We really do.
We got so many Thanoses. We got Thanos Valaus and Thanos and honey, because this one, and remember, the complete defense to defamation, y'all, is what? Fact. So we've got an individual, Valaus, who actually came up to me during the last, not this last election, because I didn't run for mayor in this last election, obviously, but the last time that we were in the race together, this, and I can call her foolish because she's older than me, and I thought, wow, the fact that you thought it was appropriate, she wanted to let me know that she had gotten a certificate from Harvard. A certificate. Okay, yeah, let's go and close out right on that. A certificate of some form of what do they call it? The black belt, six belt, whatever.
Interesting.
A certificate from Harvard, and she wanted to make sure that I was aware of her certificate from Harvard.
Whatever that means.
Juxtapose, because that's what she was doing. It was an intentional juxtaposition to my Juris Doctorate and PhD. Are you serious? Are you serious right now? But the point that you have made and pointed out so well, and we'll close it out, and I want you to close it out with any of your closing statements, is that we don't have the right people in office. If you are in a mindset, I've reiterated my qualifications because we're only given a minute to answer questions. And so my thought process was always, and I've explained this because some people, they get a little, they're intimidated. It's a micro or macro aggression for individuals who have not reached their full potential or haven't, achieve goals that they set out to. So if I say I have a Juris Doctorate and then I'm a PhD, ABD, then it's like, oh, you think you're better. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I only have I was going to curse. I only have a minute to tell you my qualifications for this very specific thing that we need. And I'm telling you that I'm a scientist, an economist, and a lawyer. So you say, oh, shit, that's what we need. But you hear, oh, she thinks she's better than that. Juxtapose, you have a mayor in office that wants to tout that she has a certificate from Harvard. Go ahead, please, Robert. You got to close this out because
Final thoughts. Okay, so here's my unsolicited advice to the world, if you will. You're fine. Stop worrying so much about everything. Look at yourself and fix something. Read a book, go for a walk. It's not as bad as it seems at an individual level. And I know for some people you're hurting and it sucks. So work out of it. But the person responsible for your pain is not the person standing next to you.
Yes. And
that's, just remember that.
I just love it. And that's so perfect for the title of this platform, The Ethical Gatekeeper. I consider Robert to be amongst ethical gatekeepers. I hope you all now agree, having learned more about this very kind, professional, smart, intentional, funny. But you'll never know any of those things if you don't do what he just said. If you're walking through life with a chip on your shoulder because of something that somebody else has done to you, and you have misplaced your anger on the next man and the next woman and on and on and on, and you have not ever even held accountable that one person that has hurt you, then you are destined for failure. And if that's how we're going to exercise our voting rights in that same capacity, then we're destined for failure. We're going to stay in this zombie apocalypse. Thank you so much, Robert.
Well, thank you for having me. This is fantastic.
It was everything that I thought it would be and more. And I'm so excited to be on your podcast. And I'm so excited that we will definitely be going live again with Robert. I wish you all could give him a hand clap. My son
wait.
in here. I don't know if you can hear him. My son is
What's
actually.
up?
How's it going? What's up?
Oh, okay. Well, at least y'all know this is real and uncut. If you were wondering if it were live, but he's clapping, and I'm glad that at 13 years old he literally understands what we're talking about. So, but yeah, thank you so much, and we are going to be live again next week, 7 p.m. with Mr. Bill Fountain, who was
nice.
one of my running mates. You're welcome to join us if
I'll
you
definitely listen. He was a nice guy.
Yeah, he equally. And some people, I think you saw I think you were at one of the events, because I think I mentioned to you that I stood up for him, because I was like, okay, I've had
you went
enough.
straight across the street to a different one.
Yes, I have had enough. I have had enough, and I'm standing up for the man because he was so and I don't mean this as weak, because sometimes we think soft-spoken means weak. I don't think he's a weak man at all, but he was very soft-spoken, and I was like, okay, you all are just being crappy people. But anyway, thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. We could go for hours, and we will in the future.
I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. This has been another episode of Evolve Weekly, The Ethical Gatekeeper, with yours truly, Tigress Sydney Acute McDaniel and Robert Yates. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Goodbye!